What exactly is a witch? Witchcraft was initially a moral matter for the church, and it was linked to heresy. And laws against or concerning witchcraft were finally repealed in 1951. So they were in place for quite a few hundred years. But what is a witch as it was understood at that time? In 1646, the writer John Gall, in his pamphlet Select Cases of Conscience, said, "In every place and every parish, every old woman with a wrinkled face, a furrowed brow, a hairy lip, a gobber tooth, a squint eye, a squeaking voice, a scolding tongue, a spindle in her hand, a dog or a cat by her side, is not only suspected but pronounced for a witch. Every new disease, notable accident, miracle of nature, rarity of art, is by them accounted for no other but an act or an effect of witchcraft." Now, he was a skeptic. He didn't believe in witchcraft. He didn't think that witches could have this sort of effect on their local communities. And he was writing his pamphlet to protest about the witchcraft trials, which were being carried out at the time by the self-proclaimed witchfinder general Matthew Hopkins, which a lot of people may very well have heard about. But however, this stereotype of the witch is still prevalent today, particularly this week when we're coming up to Halloween. And indeed, 80% of those tried for witchcraft in England were women. But what do I mean by a witch throughout this talk? Well, I'll be using the term in its historical context. In history, witchcraft is a branch of magic that is fundamentally malevolent or harmful, and a witch wants to cause you harm or even death. And that was how it was considered historically. So that's what I mean by that. Not necessarily our modern understanding of witches. From a theological point of view, a witch was complicit with the devil, was able to summon evil spirits and demons to do harm to others. We need to remember that people did absolutely believe in witchcraft, and that witchcraft could offer an explanation for sudden or unexpected misfortune, such as the death of a child, your crops failing, milk going sour, the death of a cow, or a cartwheel to fall off. So people were vulnerable to being accused of witchcraft at times of stress in people's lives, when they were searching for someone or something to blame. A witch is distinct from magic, as people would use magic to protect themselves from a witch, or consult those who were practitioners of benevolent magic, often referred to as cunning or wise men and women. Cunning folk were an important part of communities, particularly rural ones, helping people find lost items, remedy marital issues, or healing common ailments affecting people and animals. And these people fulfilled an important role in the absence of police, doctors, or the counsellors that we use today, but utilising somewhat more magical methods such as spoken charms, herbal remedies, and talismans. It was not this kind of magic that authorities sought to control, but the sort of ill-intended charms which harmed neighbours or their animals, stealing money with the help from spirits or any other form of supernatural spite. The history of witchcraft accusations is filled with stories of individuals who were likely innocent of the charges levelled against them. And these accusations often arose from genuine fear and misunderstanding or social and personal conflicts rather than evidence of actual harmful magic being carried out. So all the people that we're talking about are, in my view, from the point of view of how witchcraft was understood at the time, alleged witches. The total number of people tried for witchcraft in England throughout the period of persecution was no more than 2,000, and only 25% of those were found guilty. Now, that's not the same for other countries, but it's interesting to think that in England it was about 2,000 cases, and 25% were found guilty of that charge. So this is Joan White of Bushey. Joan White was the wife of Thomas White, a labourer, who was brought to trial on the 20th of December 1590 for being a common witch and enchantress, and for devilishly bewitching Marian Mann, daughter of William Mann of Bushey, tailor, through which she languished and died. The grand jury's verdict was that Joan White feloniously killed Marian, But when it went to the Hertford Assizes in the summer, she was acquitted. So you can see the reluctance of people on the juries to actually find guilt. 5 years later, in 1595, a woman of the same name, possibly the same person, was found guilty of witchcraft and the enchantment of goods, and she got the famous 1 year in prison and 4 turns in the pillory for that. Now this is a case about a cunning woman, Elizabeth Lane of Walsworth near Hitchin in 1598. Elizabeth was a cunning woman, and the trial depositions list people consulting her to counter bewitchment. So Joan Shadbolt said that last Whitsuntide she visited Elizabeth Lane because her husband was ill. She told her that her husband was beworded and betwattled by Mr. Knightley, and she should cut off his hair and send it to her with her son, turn his bed another way, and throw his water into the fire. She said she gave her 2 shillings and a cheese for this advice. John Smith went to her because his wife was sick, and she told him that his wife was bewitched by a deep and profane learning by the minister John Knightley. Robert Frost, troubled with a pain in his throat, visited her and was told that he was possessed by spirits and bewitched by John Knightley. And she received 16 pence, and he'd promised to give her 6 shillings and 7 pence more. That's actually quite a lot of money, 6 shillings and 7 pence. Henry Wood went to see her about his horse that was stolen, for which she received money. And Elizabeth Lane and Agnes Cooper went to her about stolen items. And under examination in court, Elizabeth Lane admitted she could say or what she knew against John Knightley, affirmed openly before the whole bench she knew nothing against him, nor no evil that ever he committed, and to this effect he hath thus much by the order of the bench set down. So in other words, she actually said, actually I haven't got anything against him, and they had to throw the case out. Her case was referred to the Assizes, but there's no record of that. That's where the gaps in the records have let us down. But it's quite likely she was, in fact, acquitted. But a few years later, in 1613, she turns up giving evidence against 2 other people on the grounds of witchcraft. So she obviously knew her audience. Now, with the next case, there is little doubt that, certainly in the case of Joan Harrison, the mother, she pretended possession of occult powers, and she was aided and abetted by her daughter Anne. A pamphlet, The Several Practices of Joan Harrison and Her Daughter, condemned at Hertford for witchcraft, 4th of August 1606, gave a catalogue of the crimes committed by the 2 women. Now, if you note the date of this, it's 1606, so they're falling under the much harsher Act of 1604. Joan lived in Royston, and according to the pamphlet, had for a long time been suspected of witchcraft. She had a verbal dispute with one of her neighbours. He called her an old hag, and she answered him, I will say little to thee, but thou shalt feel more from me hereafter. Half an hour after he left her, he suffered from a racking of the limbs, a pestiferous heat, and chill cold, as if the devil had set upon him. He was not able to either go nor stand. No physic could ease him. He opened his mind to one of his neighbours that she had bewitched him, and that if he could draw her blood, he would recover. This was a common belief, that if you attacked and drew blood from the person who had bewitched you, that would stop the effects of the spell. He succeeded in scratching Joan, upon which within 3 or 4 days, as fast as a man could recover strength, he is up and goes abroad. So, funnily enough. However, Joan took him to court for assault and successfully claimed 5 shillings plus costs. As soon as the fine was paid, he became ill again and subsequently died. In the case of her daughter Anne, Anne was walking down the street in Royston when a young woman accidentally threw water from her washing tub over her as she emptied it. Anne retorted, "Do you throw your water upon me, gossip? Before long I'll be revenged for it." When the woman went back into her house, she found her child's cradle had overturned, killing her child. Anne was also alleged to have bewitched a wealthy man's daughter, but she was able to recover through the help of her brother. And in revenge, Anne cursed and caused a plague on his cattle, and they all perished. Another man from Royston accused Joan of bewitching him after he insulted her in the local alehouse. "Look t'other way, witch, as I cannot abide a nose of that fashion, ill face." To which she replied, "Thou throwst in thy drink apace, but thou shalt not find it so easy coming out." He went out of the alehouse, and in his belly was such a rumbling as if the Tower of Babel had fallen round his ears. It drew his heart to an ague, and he cried out, "The witch, I am undone. O God, women of Royston, help me, I am a man spoiled." He found her the following day, and in his pain almost scratched her eyes out and then brought her to the town where she was apprehended. So it's a very similar pattern to the other man, where it's sort of you got to get to her and draw her blood. Both the women were arrested and their home was searched. The officers in the search found a chest, and in the chest they found the bones of a man and a woman, underneath hair of lots of different colours. At the bottom of the chest was a parchment hidden in a compass no bigger than a groat, which was a fourpenny piece. And opening the parchment, they found drawn a life-size human heart with branches coming out of it from which dangled various things like keys and a mouth. It's obviously something that was being used. Joan admitted that by using the bones, hair and parchment with the help of spirits, she could inflict pain by the pricking of a needle into the parchment. She also confessed she had 2 spirits, one for men and one for cattle. The materials described as being found in their home seem fairly damning, as does Joan's alleged confession. On the other hand, as the historian Gerrish points out, we've no idea of the circumstances under which the confession was obtained. Torturing a suspect has always been illegal in England, apart from treason, but there can be a very thin line between intensive interrogation and torture, and sleep deprivation was certainly used. Similarly, we've no evidence on how reliable the finds in the chest were. They might have been planted. In fact, we've no evidence of anything in this case, including whether the Harrisons even existed. No mention is made of them in the assize records for the summer of 1606 in Hertford, but 4 people were recorded as being sentenced to death at those sessions, and 2 of them were for a murder they committed together, Alice and Christian Stokes, and they were condemned to death for murder by witchcraft. So what does this all mean? The Hertfordshire historian Simon Walker suspects the Harrisons were actually Alice and Christian with the names changed. But for reasons for changing the names in the pamphlet is baffling. It doesn't help that the assize records give the names of the alleged victims, but no detail of the crimes, while the pamphlet gives lots of detail, but no names. So somewhere between those 2 sets of documentations, we do have a story. Alternatively, Joan and Anne may have come entirely from the pamphlet writer's imagination, with the tales of their crimes picked up from various different sources. Whatever their names, and whether or not they were actually real, the story of the Harrisons seems one of the many examples of poor, old, and marginalised being demonised in the popular imagination during the witch scares of the 16th and 17th centuries. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.